My guest today is Lee Coonfer, who is the CEO of the BC Seniors Living Association. Now, I must say, Lee, I welcome you here, but I've never heard of this association, so I'm really interested in how you answer some of these questions. Tell me exactly, what is the association? What is it all about? And what do you do as its CEO?
Right. Well, I will start off by saying, Peter, you wouldn't be the first to say they didn't know much about this organization, so don't feel that you're in the minority. And let's face it, up until the recent COVID-19, seniors issues in BC in general were essentially a sidebar story. But because of the pandemic, unfortunately, we have come to the forefront, and organizations such as ourselves have been put under a bit of a spotlight. And our organization, the BC Seniors Living Association, we represent the private operators of independent living, assisted living, and long-term care sites in communities across BC. And when we say private operators, these are the sites and communities that individuals go to in their senior years to essentially move into a very active and engaging environment that allows for social interaction. It allows for very vibrant activity settings and learning settings, but it is paid for by the resident. So that is where the private comes from. We don't essentially represent any communities or suites that are government funded. However, we do have some members who have taken on some government contracts to help alleviate some of the stress on the provincial government in terms of a supply side or the number of suites that are available. So go ahead.
How many of these facilities would be in the entire province?
Oh, in terms of the private independent living, you're looking into the hundreds. Our association, we represent just over 170 sites that include independent living primarily, but there's also an assisted living component and long-term care. And it's important to make that distinction. Independent living is just as it's worded. These are independent seniors who choose to live in a congregative or community setting to still avail themselves of the social interaction and the engaging environment. And then you move down the sort of continuum of seniors living, where there is an assisted living component where you perhaps might require some assistance, whether it's with medication or some tasks around your suite. And then long-term care is where it is more, there is a lot of, whether it's a licensed practical nurse, a registered nurse, or a healthcare aide that are assigned to certain residences because they need that level of care.
And how long have you been CEO? And second question to answer, do you enjoy what you do? Because that sounds like it's a very challenging profession that you're in.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because I love talking about it, because I get to talk about my mother. I actually came, if you can believe it, from the natural resources sector. I worked with David Emerson at Canfor, and then with Dave Legge at Legge, and then I was in the oil and gas sector. So to make a transition from that to seniors living leaves a lot of people scratching their heads. But as a child growing up, both of my parents worked. There was no babysitter. So after school, my mother would pick me up and take me to her place of work, where she was the manager of a retirement community in Ladner, West Shore Laleham. So I spent every day after school from grade 3 to about 7, spending time with my 68 grandparents. I was the luckiest kid in the world, and some of my fondest memories are from that. So I love it, Peter, to be honest. I truly do. And what I've recognized in my 2 years as CEO is that literally everyone who works in this sector do it for a reason. It's because they're passionate about it. We truly feel that the seniors and the seniors community in BC, these individuals deserve our support, our respect, our whatever we can do to make the senior years as vibrant and engaging as possible. So yeah, absolutely, I love it.
Yeah, I agree with that. do you report to or answer to the government in any way, shape, or form for this?
We are a self-regulated sector.
Okay.
Independent living. If I was to try and draw a comparison, it's essentially a condominium community with certain activities and services on site, and we would be treated much like that type of residence or community, etc. However, we do have some members, as I mentioned, that do have taken on some provincial government contracted or funded suites in order to help alleviate some of the supply pressures. And in that regard, those select few operators would be regulated by the government, and they conform to all of those regulations. But as a self-regulating industry, we take that role very seriously.
So do you have a board of directors? I'm sure.
Indeed, I do.
And how are they elected?
Sorry?
How are they elected?
They are elected by our membership at an AGM, much like any other association, much like the Mining Association of BC, Council of Forest Industries, etc. We function much like we function under the Societies Act.
Okay. And so I won't say you report to the government, but you keep the government apprised of what you're doing and how the various facilities are doing. Is that correct?
Absolutely, Peter. And at no time has it been more important to do just that than during COVID-19. Because much like you, even I can say this, even the government, some Ministry of Health and BC housing officials, if your sector is self-regulated, sometimes it's out of sight and out of mind. We don't need to worry about it until we need to do a public health directive that impacts seniors, for example. So we've been very active in terms of participating in every policy roundtable, discussion table with not only elected officials, but the ministerial officials as well, with the government, with the opposition, to make sure that they understand that this significant population of seniors, although unregulated, the sector needs to be taken into consideration. And so that's been a big role for us, is to play that facilitator, that educator to government. I call it a BCSLA 101 course for government. And again, having a bit of a political background as well, sometimes I approach these initiatives with a bit of skepticism. Sometimes ministerial officials, if they have a certain line item function, that is all they can deal with or take in. But I have to say that from Bonnie Henry to Stephen Brown, the Deputy Minister, Terry Collins, Dr. Penny Ballum with the vaccination rollout, they have been very engaged and truly solutions driven. So it's been a very pleasant surprise, I guess, but it's been a very good experience.
How many facilities are there around British Columbia, if you can talk about that?
Well, again, on the independent living side, that is well into the hundreds. Probably around 300. But again, those numbers vary. Our association, we represent about 175 of those independent living sites. So we are the association of record for the independent living seniors communities. But the important factor here is that by both federal and provincial government statistics, by 2031, the province forecasts the seniors population will grow to exceed 1.5 million individuals. That's an increase of 35% from today.
That's in Canada?
That's in BC.
In BC?
Yeah, 35% growth.
Wow.
So the community is getting bigger. We need to be creative in how we provide housing, how we provide vibrant and engaging communities. So our members have taken the position that one of our objectives is continuous improvement and innovation in terms of how we set up our communities, how we engage the seniors, how to make sure that, and this may sound selfish, but indeed it's not, how do we keep them in the independent living communities longer so that they don't transition to assisted living and long-term care? How do we keep them vibrant and engaged? And that's one of our primary focuses.
And so do you help the various homes do that?
Yes, and one of the primary tools for us to do that is, for lack of a better word, Peter, an accreditation or a certification program where we have established certain standards and expectations of site members in order for them to obtain what we call our seal of approval. And there's a big logo and it's a big plaque, much like the hotel's 5-star program or
Yeah.
things like that. The exciting thing is, and I don't know when this airs, but we have some very exciting news on the seal of approval program where we are going to be launching what I call the revitalized program that takes our seal of approval or accreditation program, makes it completely digital and data driven. So our sites can not only ensure that they meet our expectations, but how do we continuously improve? And they can take the data from their site and work with their employees and staff to do that. And it is probably one of the most innovative platforms in any jurisdiction in Canada. We're very excited about it.
So what would be one or two of the biggest issues that come up on a regular basis that you have to deal with?
Well, these days, Peter, it's COVID-19 24/7, to be quite honest with you. And again, it is how do we pivot our organization to ensure that our membership are included in the discussion of government directives, of programs going forward. And it is a bit of a balancing act because we are self-regulated. So I need to be able to, or we need to be able to engage with the government without inviting regulation. So it's a very fine line that you want to advocate on behalf of your membership, but you want to do so in a way that you are taking care of your own knitting, so to speak.
So with this COVID pandemic that's going on,
yes,
how have your membership in the various facilities throughout the province, have they had the first shot and sometimes the second shot? And how have they done that? Have people come to the facility to do that for them?
That's you hit the nail on the head with this question, Peter. We've been working very closely with Dr. Penny Ballum, who's, as you know, the executive director of the vaccination rollout. And in conversations with Dr. Bonnie Henry, initially, when the province identified their priority queues for vaccination, of course, they targeted and identified the seniors population as what they call a population at risk. What they didn't include were the residences of the seniors living or independent living sector, as I spoke of. If you're self-regulated, sometimes you're out of sight, out of mind. So we've had to work very hard with Dr. Bonnie Henry to explain and educate that independent living are communities of seniors as well. They are in the same environments as assisted living and long-term care, even though they're independent. So they need to be included, and all seniors need to be treated equally. So once we were able to convince Dr. Bonnie Henry of that, we then worked with Penny Ballum very closely, where we were essentially opening up our data, our membership data to them. And without question, I was on calls with Penny Ballum sometimes Saturday night, providing resident data and staff data as well to ensure an efficient vaccination of our communities and just as importantly, the staff who work there. We've now completed all of the first vaccinations, or they've been offered to everyone. Second doses, the government has put the 4-month window between the two, so we are still about 2 months away from second doses.
So you said that the age is probably somewhere between 65 and 99.
That captures a big window of our population, yes.
So how would I, if I'm say 71, how would I know who to go to and where I would be accepted and in one of your homes?
Well, here's the beauty of sort of the private independent living service offering or value added proposition, if you will. It's up to choice, up to the individual to decide not for someone to tell them this is where you ought to go.
Okay, that's good.
Essentially, if in your scenario, if I were 71 years old and I was starting to think that my house is too big, it's time that perhaps I need to be in an environment where there's more social interaction, more engagement. And if I was able to, the first step would be to go on Google. All of our members are very savvy in terms of how they market themselves. Again, being private operators, you generate your residency based on your marketing efforts. It's up to you to attract the business, and it is business because the individual is paying for it. But the beauty of it is, Peter, the individual gets to window shop, and they get to go to the communities to see what the environment is like, the profile of the residents, and they can say to themselves, "Yep, I fit in here. I will be comfortable here," because that's an important proposition. Anywhere, one of the biggest fears of seniors who move from home to a community is that it's like a kid going to a new school. Am I going to fit in? Are they going to like me? Those sorts of things, all those questions come up, and our members do a very good job entertaining prospective residences and make sure that they get the full picture of what the community is like and the services that they offer. But again, the fundamental beauty of it, it's up to the senior, and that's so important. I think they deserve choice. I absolutely do.
What is the biggest challenge you basically face on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis?
Essentially, it is trying to differentiate in the public side and the government side an independent living community or residence and what the public stereotype is of seniors living, which is primarily assisted living or long-term care. Far too often, there is that belief or stereotype that seniors living in seniors residences are these inactive individuals who require care all the time. And that's absolutely not the case. I go to some residences today and I would move in there tomorrow. They are absolutely wonderful, very, again, vibrant, engaging. But that story, far too often, the impression or the stereotype from the public and to a certain degree the government is that these seniors communities are these very sterile, Spartan sites where people are being moved around in wheelchairs and need to be craned into a bed. That's not the case at all. And that's one of the biggest challenges that's before us in our membership and our organization is how do we better communicate that? How do we articulate the value proposition to individuals? Because this is a tremendous service offering.
Perhaps one of my last questions is, what can we do as a media company to help you in your efforts and your situation, the things that cause you
But Peter, I appreciate that very much, and you're doing it right now, allowing us to tell our story, providing creative opportunities for our members to market themselves, to provide different mediums that to reach these prospective residents, seniors and their families who are sitting around thinking of that transition from living at home to a community. Seniors are very savvy. There's many residences that I've seen who've been walking around with their iPads and their laptops. I kid you not. So those traditional marketing channels are good, but we need to be creative. And your social media platforms, for example, we need to broaden how we get our message out. And podcasts like this help in that regard, absolutely. But it's in those daily discussions with your friends and neighbors when the topic does come up to remind people that the perception of seniors living isn't this tiny sliver of assisted living and long-term care. It is so much bigger than that. It's so much more vibrant than that. And it's all about storytelling.
So my last question is, what is your one biggest struggle that you're trying to achieve right now?
The one biggest struggle, and I don't call it a struggle, it's a challenge, and I think we're meeting it head on, is how do we as a self-regulated industry provide assurance to the residents, to their family, to their loved ones, that the individual is moving into a very caring setting, a very safe setting, a very active and engaging setting. Far too often, people will say, well, if you're not firmly government regulated, how do I know that you're going to be looking after my mother or father, my aunt, uncle, grandparent, etc.? And that challenge is, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. So as long as our members continue to innovate, to continuously improve their service offerings, I think that will take care of itself. But that's a long time proposition. So we need to be a bit more proactive, and our new seal of approval is going to help with that. But it's absolutely that. It's how do we assure the resident and loved ones that they are safe and they're cared for.
That's a good ending. Lee, thank you. I appreciate the 20 minutes you've taken. It's opened my eyes tremendously.
Well, good.
Which I one day I'm going to have to make a decision.
I don't expect that's anytime soon, Peter.
No. Anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it, Lee, very much.
Peter, it's my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
You're very welcome.
All right.